You ready? Is it going?
It is.
We're going? Mm-hmm. Oh. Okay. You want to start?
Sure.
You the man.
Hello, I'm Brian.
And I'm Tom.
And we are the Dividend Dudes.
We're the...
No?
No.
Okay. Hi, I'm Brian.
I'm Tom. No, that was good. We should do that. We don't have to repeat that. We'll keep going.
I know
more. Oh, really? Okay.
You start.
Hi, I'm Tom.
And I'm Brian. And together, we are Penn and Teller.
Oh.
That's a copyright infringement.
I think though we can't say that.
All right. Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm Tom.
And together, we are the Dividend Dudes.
The Dividend Dudes.
All right.
All right. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about an extension on our PE ratio that we talked about in our last video. We want to cover a little bit about what we did with the stock purchase that we made, and we're going to use this what we call a trailing price to earnings ratio against it. And what we ended up purchasing was AT&T during our session last time. And so far the market has been doing pretty bad. I mean, overall it's currently it's May 2022, so if you're looking at the timestamp of the video and it's somehow 5 or 6 years from now and the video is still up, you want to go back to May of 2022 to actually look at what things were going on today. So right now the market's kind of going crazy, but for the sake and purpose of this video, we want to cover the term. We want to cover how we analyze against the stock that we purchased, and we're going to use that again later on this month as we purchase and look at other stocks to buy. And this is all going to be based on the $400 savings that people have left. We are trying to do this based on the valuation that this is what the average person will have. Now that's going to change as things happen. If we go into a full swing recession, maybe that money's less. We'll have to look and see what the US Census and the Fed report comes out with. That'll kind of give us an idea of how much that this stuff is actually going to affect what we buy. So in the last episode, we purchased AT&T.
Yay!
It was a great stock, $400. That pays a dividend of roughly about 5.5%. That was 9%, went down to 5%, which is much more realistic. So if you have $400 of AT&T stock, if you assume it's 5% dividends, you're going to get a check of $40 per year.
Woohoo! That's
yes.
Almost a tank of gas.
One tank. So if you
at current prices.
Yeah, if you drive a Prius, like the tank of gas is really expensive right now too. So the idea though is that we're going to take that dividend. We're not going to reinvest it necessarily directly into AT&T. We're going to let it pool in the account. We have picked. There's a bunch of funds out there that you can buy. A bunch of platforms that you can use to buy stocks. We picked TD Ameritrade. We don't want to get into the analysis of which one is better than the others. My personal account uses E-Trade. Brian has Robinhood, I believe.
I've got Robinhood, Fidelity, and Ameritrade. Yep,
and I have crypto.com too, despite my loathing of crypto. But there's a lot of platforms out there. We're not going to get into the analysis of those yet. Maybe we will at a later date. But for this platform, we're using TD Ameritrade, and that is basically what we're using to. If we get a dividend from AT&T, it goes into that account, and then when we do our analysis, I think it's going to be about twice per month. Okay. So we're going to do that dividend into whatever stock that we pick. So basically, if we get a dividend check from AT&T, we're going to take that if we have no reason to spend it. And in this portfolio, we actually don't. We think.
For 23 cents?
23 cents. Hey. So.
What would that even buy?
I don't know. I think you'd have to like...
Can you get a gumball for that? No, I think that's a quarter.
Do you know those horsey rides you get at Meijer?
Oh, the penny ride, yeah.
Yeah, I think those are still a penny. Mm-hmm. It's losing Meijer a lot of money.
We could ride that 23 times.
Somebody call about that. They probably cancel the ponies. That'd piss off children everywhere. Like, who did that? But that's, we're going to take that dividend check that we got. We're going to buy the next stock based on these terms that we picked out, and hopefully over time, because this is actual real money that we're investing, people will see that we put our money where our mouth is, and we're actually showing you how this works over time. So right now 23 cents doesn't seem like a lot, but that is exactly how I got started. relatively certain that's how Brian got his, rolling over time.
Yeah.
And you can see that snowball picking up and rolling down the hill as time goes on. So
unfortunately, when you begin, it's not sexy, it's not instant gratification. You're not getting that dopamine hit or that tweet that comes in that says, I just invested $400 and now it's $3,000 and I'm just making money. No, it's a slow burn. And
yeah, it's a frustrating one too sometimes.
Yeah.
Because that's actually why we're covering the term that we're covering today, is because sometimes when you look at a stock and you're thinking, well, their financials look great. They're making money, the company's growing, and the price did this. For whatever reason, the logic goes right out the window sometimes.
But unless you are at the end of your, I don't want to say life, but end of your career and you need those dividend checks to live on, you're retired, and you don't have a lot of time to bounce back, who cares if it goes down? Because as you look historically, the market's going to dip and come up. There's a ebb and flow to these things, and you can outweigh the dip in the market, because it's going to come back up and then you'll get all that money back. But your dividend checks are going to keep coming in, and that's what you're literally looking for, is that steady income.
Yeah, and the other point to make on that is the market fluctuations. People will say, well, yeah, but it went down. So it doesn't go. You didn't lose money unless you actually sell the stock.
Right. You still have the same number of stock that you had before. It's just worth a little less.
Yep. So don't get emotional about doing this, or even when it goes way up. I bought Chevron last year, and it's up like 60% this year. I'm not buying more because it's expensive relative to their earnings. So don't buy into the hype. Be very even-keeled, level-headed about this, because over time, if you're not passive aggressive with every single purchase you make and you're steady about it, you'll make a lot of money.
Yeah.
This will be very good over time.
And I think a better mind frame is not how much money can I make off this stock, but how much stock can I buy with my money. So for your example, it's up 60%. You could buy less stock with $1,000 than you could when it was 60% less. So you're getting more stock, which means you're getting more dividends for that, because you have more stock to get dividends on.
Yeah, and if it wasn't $400, let's say it's $1 million in AT&T stock, that's 40 grand a year that you'd be basically giving away after taxes and stuff. It's about 40 grand. So would you really be willing to give up $4,000 a month roughly because your stock price went up a little bit? Most people, the answer is probably no. I mean, some people would say, hey, well, I'll take that big chunk of money and spend it right. But if you do that, if you take the money out of the market in an asset where the cash is actually working for you, it's doing something for you, and you move it into like a cash only, you deposit it into the bank, you're forgetting a big factor: inflation. The Fed's job is to manage that. It's to manage printing money. That's a really complicated discussion. We're not going to get into that today, maybe. But the Fed's job is to manage the amount of money that's flowing and circulating through the system, so there's a healthy level of inflation. There's also deflation out there, which, if you have cash, that could be good, but their job is to prevent that.
Right.
So there's a reason for that. It has to do with sovereignty and currencies and like a whole bunch of stuff. But for the sake of, why would I take the $1 million and get my $40,000 a year versus take my $1 million in deposit and go spend it on whatever I want? That's one reason why you don't want to do that. 40 grand a year, if you look at historically, most stock dividends, if the company's healthy, if they're not healthy, they can't pay their bills, and dividends happen to be a bill. Most dividends, if the company's healthy, go up between 9 and 12% per year. So if you're making, 23 cents this year, off that one purchase, you're going to make, 26 cents, 27 cents or something like that on average the following year. Again, this depends on a lot of things financially within the stock itself. So you're going to want to look at that. So we purchased AT&T. And one of the things that we want to do with these numbers and everything that we just talked about is kind of analyze why we picked them a different way. So we covered, I think, earnings per share, dividend yield, and a few other metrics in our past videos. This one today, I want to cover what's called the trailing price to earnings ratio. And I actually like this one. I like this one more than the PE ratio. So if you're going to look at that and you're looking at a company and saying, well, I own stock in DuPont, AT&T, ADP, ConocoPhillips, whatever stock that you own in, you want to take an analysis of a company to see how they're doing today relative to how they were doing before. You want to look at their current price to earnings ratio as well as their trailing price to earnings ratio. Now, all the trailing price to earnings ratio is if you take the earnings per share of the company, like how much they're making, their net earnings, and you check it against the price of the stock. So if they're trailing, or AT&T is around $19.67 or as of this morning. If it was $20 and their earnings per share ratio was 2.37, I think is what it was.
Right.
Then you can come up with your trailing PE ratio. Now, the trailing PE ratio has to account for the last 12 months of your earnings per share. So if we were to make this really simple, you take the current price of the stock and you divide it by the earnings per share. Now, that earnings per share number can be, in most platforms, the last 12 months. So that'll kind of give you what they're doing today versus what they were doing before. To get the actual previous number, you're actually going to have to go into the balance sheet. You have to go back in time a little bit and look at what the quarterly or the previous year prior to that, what their earnings per share ratio was.
Right.
For AT&T, I believe one of the years was 3.18, 2020, I believe it was 2020, and then 2021 it was 3.4. So what that basically means is their price relative to their earnings for the trailing PE ratio went down. That's usually good. Usually it's good. Now sometimes it's bad if they're not making a lot of money, or in GE's case they sold a whole bunch of assets, then that's not good either. But in this case, AT&T from 2020 to 2021, there's a shocker with COVID. They actually made more money in 2021. But their price of the stock didn't go up relative to the increase of their earnings. So if you're looking at a company that's somewhat undervalued, that's a good way to do it. It's not the only metric, but it's one of my favorites because it's a pretty quick way to tell, at least at first glance, what their actual earnings were and what the price of the company was relative to their earnings.
And by undervalued, overvalued, we mean?
Undervalued basically is what the market prices it in as, like, okay, everybody thinks it should be worth $10, but really it should be worth $12. If it's overvalued, everybody, like Tesla stock for a while, they're not making any money, but it was up to like $1,000 per share. There's no actual finances behind that dictate that that's actually the value of the company. So in that case, it could be overvalued. Overvalued is if you want to think like car sales or something, the car is worth more to you than it would be to somebody else. Or like if you ever do an insurance claim on your house, you think your insurance claim is this much, and the insurance company comes in and says, no, it's not 20 grand, it's like 10. So undervalued just basically means in investing terms that it's probably worth more than what people think it's worth at the current time. Overvalued means it's probably worth less than what people think it's worth at the time. Now, if everybody thinks the stock is worth more than what it's trading at, there's probably a reason for that. Maybe there's a big upcoming product launch. Maybe they discovered the cure for cancer. Maybe they've figured out a way to reverse aging. Whatever that is, there's probably a relatively good reason why it's either undervalued or overvalued. And you kind of have to dig deeper, and unfortunately for PE and trailing PE ratio, they're not going to show you that right at first glance. You're going to find that out if you look at the other stuff that we've been talking about. And the balance sheet and cash flow statements, we'll get into those later, are extremely good ways to figure out what's really happening with that money, especially when you look at the balance sheet and it shows a whole bunch of unusual items on there. Like, what's all this stuff?
Right. But this is a great way to initially calculate how the stock is doing as it compares to its earnings.
Yeah, and this is it, like you're basically looking in the mirror for 12 months. Like, how am I doing in 12 months? If you're exercising and working out, and you probably look better than you did 12 months ago. If you're not, and you're just getting older like I am, you kind of look down here and you go, what the heck's happening? And so this is the financial way to do that for a stock. So if you're looking at in AT&T's case, one of the reasons why we bought them, now we didn't use the trailing PE ratio to this, but the trailing PE ratio confirmed our decision, at least this way, that they are relative to their earnings over the course of the last year, they're doing better. So Now the market,
It's a good indicator.
yeah, it's a pretty good indicator. Now the market's been down over 20%, like the NASDAQ, I think, has just crashed this year. There's a lot of talk of us going into recession. We can cover that in the next video. I have one last point to make on this, is earnings per share, and when you're looking at it, when you look at most platforms, once again, they're going to show you the last 12 months. If you really want to start comparing how they're doing, you want to look at that, and instead of annual, you want to go to quarterly. So if you go to quarterly, you can see their earnings per share each quarter. Now, when they show you that, it's the earnings for the quarter. To get the annual earnings per share, you got to add up all 4 quarters. So when we talked about 15 months, or what would I do? Like I did messed up math one of my videos. Like it was supposed to be
5 years.
Yeah, five quarters, and 5 times 3 would get you 18 months. I said 15, but so basically, if you go back 5 quarters and you look at their earnings per share relative to that, that's actually a really good indicator to see how they're doing relative to their price too. That's how I do it. I look at the quarterly reports, but I go back quite a ways. Annual ones sometimes can leave out some important details, like, for example, all of GE's asset sales, they all happened within like a 6-month period. So if you're looking at the annual earnings per share number, they're not going to show you that. So you have to be kind of careful about, you know, just taking generalizations for an annual number. So I do it by quarterlies. Now, obviously, if you're new to this, you're probably going to want to talk to a financial advisor about how that might look for you. But for our sake and purpose, that is how earnings per shares works, according to a trailing PE ratio. So,
Yay.
yay. Sorry for the nerd bomb. That's our job, though.
Well, that was a lot.
It was a lot. So for recap, the trailing PE ratio, what you're going to do is you're going to take the current stock price and you're going to divide that by the earnings per share. And then if you want to find out what it was doing now compared to what it was doing a year ago, you're going to take the current price and you're going to divide it by, you know, the trailing PE from years or reports prior, quarters prior, years prior, whatever you want to do. That'll give you a good idea relative to the stock, how it's doing today versus how it was doing last year. A lot can happen in a year, but for big businesses, like in AT&T's case, it's a slow engine. They don't change overnight. So
Exactly. And they could absorb losses and pain better than a small company.
Yeah, that's another good point about the size. Size does matter, especially with this stuff. If it's a small company and, you know, let's say they're $1 billion company and they lost, you know, 50 million, that hurts them a lot more than 50 million would hurt AT&T.
Yeah.
So they sound like big numbers, but you have to take that in context of the size of the company. And the same thing too with being able to pay their dividend. Sometimes I see people come to us and they say, hey, you know, this company pays 10%, I think I should buy it, but then you look at their earnings per share and it's negative. In the case of trailing price to earnings ratio, if they have negative earnings per share, you're not going to be able to find much in terms of a trailing PE because they don't have any earnings.
Can't divide that through.
Yeah, it doesn't. The math doesn't work. So if they've got negative earnings per share, we're probably not going to tackle a lot of companies that do that because, again, our focus is ability to create income like we've done for ourselves over time. So
Right.
I think that's all I have for this video.
Yeah. I think it was a lot to digest.
Probably too much, but
Eventually we're going to run out of technical terms and how to use it, and we'll be able to talk more about fun things.
yeah, the idea is to kind of give people a foundation to go by, and then we'll probably rehash these every, I don't know, 6 months or so, just more quickly, just so people understand there's a method behind the madness. It's not just like, hey, they made this, so they look good. So yeah, but can they afford what they just did? So
Right.
it'll get more entertaining, maybe.
Yeah. We could talk about fun things like food shortages and how the war on Ukraine is affecting the markets, and
Fun things.
just entertaining, fun things.
Entertaining,
Happy.
fun things. Happy,
Yeah.
happy joy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so war in Ukraine is not, it's fun.
It's, no.
No, it's not. Anyways, current events.
I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, so we'll get into that, and then probably, like I said, twice a month we'll go back into this and we'll take a look at those picks and we'll kind of tell you why and which term we use to pick that stock, and you'll see real time how we're doing.
Yep, and we'll be able to use the newer terms that we come up with each video.
Sure. That's all I got for now. And the next video we're going to cover current events, at least as far as we know.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe, like, hit that bell, and as always,
Happy investing.